Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. This is Pew Pew Doos, make firearm content. Today I'm talking about height over bore. This is coming from comments I've got in other videos on how I like to set up some of my rifles where I can keep iron sights and add a scope to it. I raise the scope, add see-through scope rings underneath so I can keep the iron sights, add a scope. The issue is the scope and the bore itself are running at two different planes. The bullet's going to travel one direction, this can only see straight. So down range, you want to match up for rimfire stuff. I'll just set up at 25 meters. That's where it's going to hit, and then I can adjust beyond that or closer up. Closer up, with this particular setup, I would have iron sights, but in particular, if I bring it super close, it's not going to match up at all. Like, it will be hitting at a completely different spot because the arch of the bullet, its travel, it would be completely different to where the scope is going to line up. At distance, it'll take a natural dive, so you can adjust then, but that is the issue of height over bore in a nutshell. You can break it down more, but all I'll say is, with me, I like this because I have iron sights and I have a magnified optic up top. I can see at a distance for small game hunting, for plinking, for just literally anything. It makes sense, and maybe not just rimfire, but other generals and other rifles in general. As far as like structurally how strong it is, the scopes are gonna be weaker, but the scope itself is still the weak point. The glass and the housing is still weaker than the mount itself. So go get into it.
All right, so first we have an AR, and we're going to focus on the front sight post. So you have the top of the post, which is right here, and then you have the center of the barrel, which is in here. So notice it's that high.
Yeah.
And then you come back here, it's that high. This uses an inline recoil, so it goes straight back into your shoulder. Go ahead and set that down. Bring in Kalashnikov. So this sight seems a lot lower than that sight, but notice the stock dips down, so that way you can actually get in there and get behind it. And then we come over to the front sight, still a bit high. You still got that guy right there. Then we put them right next to each other, and what we notice is the AR actually has a slightly higher front sight. But then people constantly bitch and moan, like, then when you go ahead and put on your dogleg scope and it brings it up a little bit higher, you put on your optic and it's got the battery compartment, all of its electronics, and the dots actually like up here. And then people are like, oh, it's height over bore, it's terrible. And then they get the dust covers with the Picatinny rails to try and bring it back down, but most of those kind of suck unless you get like the Zenico or something like that where it actually like grips into other places. It's a whole lot of added complexity over an issue that's really not an issue. Then go back to Mr. AR, who naturally has a bit of an advantage of having an immediately flat top receiver that's integral. That's great, you thought, as you put a red dot on there, and then you need to scrunch down real low, and then people didn't like that. That wasn't good enough. So they put on a high mount, and then a higher mount, and then a higher mount, until you're doing just a chin weld. And then we go back a few steps, and you have the carry handles. And then those came up to about the same height as, a little bit higher than this, like you've seen it. I don't have the M16A1 here right now, but those come up a little bit higher than this guy. And then you mount a rail on top of that. And then you mount your optic on top of that. And usually the optic has like a ring or something, so it's even a little bit higher than just the rail with the optic. And you get, again, that same sort of like a chin weld mount, but not like a cheek weld. It's like, here maybe. And then you have the super high speedy guys who are like, all right, I want a flat top. And I'm going to put an LPVO in like a cantilever mount that pushes it forward and brings it back at the same time. But I also want a red dot because the 1X on this isn't a true NX and I need to be hyper speed man. So they remove the top of one of their scope rings. They throw on one of those ones with a Picatinny rail and they throw a micro red dot on top of that. And so now they are once again back to that sort of like chin weld, just straight up and down sort of deal. And then you have things like the G3, where it has, again, the same stock dip. And then you have like tubes and like the charging handle tube in lieu of a gas tube, or the gas tube, yeah. So they're all about the same height, and I understand not wanting to have it be too high, but just about everything you can do at this point, it's sort of an equilibrium, and you're always going to be doing that give and take. And it's like, if you didn't have those scope rings, if you want to bring it in.
Yeah.
If you didn't have these scope rings that allow you to see the iron sights through here and put the optic up, you'd have to do the reverse or just have no iron sights. And this is honestly the best option in this particular case because it's like, so do you want to spend $300 on a red dot and another like $80 for a scope ring?
Mm-hmm.
No. So, and then it's like, for something like this, it's a bit more acceptable to have an LPVO with a red dot mounted on top of it. And nobody, bitches about that. I've been off and on a fan of the canned red dot, so you still get both of them, but it's like, now you're shooting like this. That's not very comfortable when you could just shoot like this. It's all personal preference.
There's
a lot of it doesn't
options out there.
really matter. And if you've noticed the trend with a lot of the red dots and the high-speed guys where they have the like absolutely ridiculous like skyscraper height red dot mounts, height over bore left the conversation a long time ago, and it refuses to come back because it's scared of all of us and what we do. Point being, don't get too stuck in the weeds over it. It really doesn't matter that much so long as you plan it out for what you're going to be doing and just don't get surprised by what happens, because it's like, if you do have a scope, like a scope should be lower. A red dot can be higher. A red dot is oftentimes better lower because you're going to be using it at closer range, but at the same time, it's like if you sight it in at, say, really close, it'll compensate for when you get out a little bit farther at still close range, but not super close. Man. Either way, all it comes down to is planning and proper execution. It's really not like that big of a deal, but people make it a gigantic deal. Like, oh no, you can't, you gotta use the AR because its sights are lower. It's like, it's not though. And then it's like, even with this, like the M4 sight radius is nearly the same. Like if you look at them, like the rear sight lined up with this rear sight, and then this front sight lined up with that front sight, they're nearly the same.
Because people talk about like, the AK having a much shorter sight radius.
But it's not. It's just
really
that the rear
not,
sight is forward more.
Yeah.
Like if you took this front sight post and pushed it out to here,
then you really would, yeah.
Here, and it's like it'd still be the same. It's the same thing.
Now, in closing, in just my opinion, with this, if I had like the front lens, if this was like a 50 millimeter, this would really be rubbing on the barrel. If I had 40 millimeter, I wouldn't have the front sight. So this is I forget what 32. I can even go to 36 and still have access, but I already had this scope, so this was on a different 22 rifle. I threw into this one. It's 3-9. It does everything I wanted to do. I still have iron sights, and it's just a overall very functional, practical system. Is this the absolute best? No, there's more expensive, there's better options out there, but for my purposes of, hey, I want to shoot paper or shoot small game at 50, scope. I want to have iron sights just in case this breaks, or just closer targets, I still have iron sights. And it's really that simple for me. You know, like, you want to say something? Go ahead.
I would say, what does the Winchester Wildcat do very well?
Lightweight.
Exactly.
And it's been very reliable, easy to clean.
It's super lightweight, and what's really lightweight, other than just putting on slightly taller scope rings so you can still use your iron sight instead of putting a super low mount, which then you'd have to take off this iron sight because otherwise it'd hit the body. Mm-hmm. And then you'd have to mount another sight, which would be the weight of another sight and added complexity, more batteries, more bullshit. And it's like, this thing's super light and super simple. This is a super light, super simple, easy way to do this. This fits. It's aesthetic. Now, if you went ahead and you put on like a full-on like Elkin because you just have money blowing out of your ass, apparently, $2,000 optic on a $200 rifle.
Because now you brought
like you're evolving backwards.
Now because you brought up the G3
mm-hmm.
on the PTR 91, it does have a Picatinny rail top.
Mm-hmm.
I could do the same type of setup and still keep the iron sights with that, because I forgot what it's, a Sig Sauer 1-6. I forget what exact scope it is. The current mount covers up the iron sights completely. I kind of want to do the same deal with that. What's your thought on that? You think it's good, bad? Or you think?
I would say that it's like
Because for me, it gives me the claw mount vibes, but modern.
Like, it makes sense, and the G3 has it kind of got like, it's kind of the worst perpetrator of the height over bore thing, because it's like it has a little swoop down in the stock. The sights are kind of low. They're kind of in like a medium height, but that kind of fucks you on trying to have anything that's really low, because then it like co-witnesses, but like the drum is so thick
I couldn't.
it
Yeah,
obscures
yeah.
everything.
I couldn't get. I tried to
And
get
then
a
it's
low.
like you try and mount above it, and it's like you need a giant skyscraper mount, and it's like, unless if you want something other than a red dot, that's where it kind of goes in, and it's like, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. Like I said, I wouldn't get too stuck in the weeds. Just make sure that, like, try and limit it, but if you go above it, it's not that big of a deal. Like,
Yeah,
do you get where, like,
I hear you.
go above the iron sights, but don't go way above them. Like, height over bore is a thing, but it's not that big of a deal of a thing. Like, your iron sights are still going to work for close in. Your optic's going to work for farther out. In fact, I would say, like, go full bore with, get like a 4 to like 18 or a 4 to 24 or something like that. That way it's like, that is absolutely like out there type magnification. And then your iron sights are for like everything 50 and like in between.
Yeah.
Like 400. Or not 400.
Yeah.
Yeah, 400. Just 400.
Be optimistic. But no,
Be Chad.
I
shoot
hear you.
iron sights out to 400.
I hear you. But yeah, we took this to range. It was fun. Like, if I'm messing around and bringing it in, it's like, if it's 0 to 25, I bring it into like 7 yards. It's not gonna make any sense. Fair enough. Like, but then I have iron sights for that. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching.
Have a nice day.
Hope we made